What is up, everybody? It's Animac here for AnimeUproar, and today I will be talking about Vinland Saga, which is already one of my favorite anime of 2019, and that is saying a lot. 2019 has given us some truly amazing series, including Mob Psycho Season 2, Dororo, Attack on Titan Season 3 Part 2, Demon Slayer, and many more, but Vinland Saga has made this year that much better, and I absolutely had to make a video talking about it. I especially want to talk about it because of the important lessons about war and human nature that this anime teaches us, and in my opinion you can learn more from just watching this anime than you can from many history or civics classes that they actually teach in schools. I know I probably sound like I'm exaggerating here, but I really don't think so, and during the course of this video I will explain why. By the way, I will only be covering the part of the story that has already aired in the anime as of the making of this video. So if you're concerned about manga spoilers, don't worry, there won't be any manga spoilers here. The first thing that struck me about the Vinland Saga anime was how it begins, and the story of Thors in particular. Thors was once a ruthless and remorseless Viking warrior who inspired fear in his enemies, and he had risen all the way up to the rank of commander in the Jomsviking band. But slowly, Thors changes and begins to see that war is not all that it's cracked up to be. After the birth of his first child, Thors realizes that there are more important things in life than glory on the battlefield, and he begins to see war for what it is: cruel, tragic, and unforgiving. Because of this, Thors decides to stop being a warrior and opts instead to build a peaceful life in Iceland with his wife Helga and his two children, Thorfinn and Eva. Thors develops the belief that a true warrior does not need a sword, meaning that a wise man should spend his life pursuing constructive and productive things, not destructive things like war. This philosophy is very much in line with the lessons we've been taught in schools and in the media ever since we were children, and when I say this, I am primarily referring to the Western world, the so-called First World, which has been largely free from large-scale military conflict since World War II. And if this was the whole message of Vinland Saga and Thors remained the main character of the story, then this anime would not be anything new to us. We'd get to see some cool Viking stuff, we'd get to enjoy the wise badassery of Thors, and that would have been that. But what really makes Vinland Saga memorable, what really makes it stand out from other modern stories about war and conflict, is what happens a mere 4 episodes into the anime. Despite his best efforts, Thors is forced to leave the peace of Iceland in order to participate in the wars that the Vikings are waging in England. He doesn't do this willingly. He resists the call to fight at first, but he eventually relents because Floki, another Jomsviking commander, threatens to make all the innocent people in Thors' village suffer unless Thors agrees to come with him back to England. Thors doesn't want innocent people to pay the price for his warrior past, and so he ultimately agrees to heed Floki's call. Unfortunately for Thors, Floki never intended to fight alongside Thors again. Instead, angry that Thors abandoned the Jomsviking for a peaceful life, Floki contracts Askeladd and his men to ambush Thors and assassinate him. Even when ambushed and vastly outnumbered, Thors shows himself to be an unbelievable warrior and he outclasses all of his opponents. But Thorfinn, Thors' young son, had secretly boarded Thors' ship back in Iceland, and as a result, when they are ambushed by Askeladd's men, Askeladd is able to use Thorfinn as a hostage. In order to protect his son, Thors agrees to give up his life and Askeladd's men succeed in assassinating him. This sets the main story into motion as Thorfinn begins blaming himself for the death of his father, and he dedicates his life to becoming a powerful warrior so that he can one day get his revenge and kill Askeladd in a duel. The story then follows Thorfinn's development from a grieving child to a ruthless killer bent on revenge. But beyond the surface of the story, there are clear historical and philosophical lessons to be learned. Back in Iceland, when Thors and his crew were preparing to leave England, many of the young men of the village and even Thorfinn himself were actively looking forward to going into battle. Viking culture and the Norse pagan religion glorified the act of being a fearless warrior above everything else. And so these young men who had never actually seen war firsthand were excited to finally fulfill what they believed to be their true purpose as Norsemen. However, the one experienced warrior among them, Thors, is the one who dreads going into war rather than looking forward to the idea because Thors knows the true face of war. He knows the suffering, brutality, and destruction that war brings. To him, war is not just a story, not just a glorious fairy tale. To him, war is a cruel and harsh reality that he had to face many times before. and Thors does his best to convey this message to Thorfinn and the other young men from the village. But the lesson that Vinland Saga teaches us is not just a simple war is bad, so we should all just avoid war and then humanity can live happily ever after. Life is not as simple as all that, and Thors finds himself in a situation where he cannot avoid war even though he clearly wants to. If he tries, other innocent people that he cares about will be put in danger, and he is left with little choice but to fight again. This is often true in the real world too. Most soldiers who fight in wars don't do so because they genuinely enjoy risking their lives and killing others. Most soldiers fight because they believe that it is the only way to protect the people that they care about. They fight because they believe that they are defending their families, their friends and neighbors, their communities, and their countries. If they had the choice, most soldiers probably wouldn't fight at all. But often in war, people feel that they have no choice but to fight. They see fighting as self-defense. They are afraid that if they don't fight, they will be defenseless against the enemy, or they are afraid that someone will punish them and their families for refusing to fight. Even if you want to avoid war, you can still be dragged into it against your will, and that is exactly what happens to Thors. Thors has the right frame of mind. He is wise and disciplined, he is experienced and strong, but he still ends up dead, not through any fault of his own, but because of a series of events orchestrated by other people. This is the basic principle behind the realist school of thought in international relations. No matter how peaceful you want to be, no matter how badly you want to avoid war, sometimes it's out of your control. Sometimes war is unavoidable, not because of your actions, but because of the actions of someone else, actions that you cannot control. And that's why you have to be prepared, vigilant, and strong. Being strong might save your life one day, but being idealistic will not. And while you can learn this way of thinking if you start taking courses in international relations in college or university, from my experience, this is not the type of lesson that was taught to me in elementary school or high school in Canada. Now, my life experiences are unique because I moved to Canada at the age of 10, and before that, I lived in what is now the former Yugoslavia. When I was still a small child, a civil war broke out in Yugoslavia, and I was a refugee from the war. I saw and experienced a lot of hardship, and I don't say that to present myself as a victim. On the contrary, as hard as those experiences were, they made me stronger in the long run. But the point I want to make is that having lived in both a war zone and a calm Western nation like Canada during my formative childhood years, I learned to look at the world from multiple perspectives. With that said, it seems to me that here in the West, many people operate under the assumption that large-scale conflict is a thing of the past, just because there is no large-scale conflict going on where they currently happen to live. I love Vinland Saga, but we don't have to look back to the Viking era to see the horrors of large-scale conflict. As we speak, there are large-scale conflicts taking place in parts of the Middle East, Africa, Southeast Asia, and Eastern Europe. And there is civil unrest in many other places of the world as well. And yet, here in the West, there are individuals who will get genuinely upset about mean words on Twitter and play the victim while people in other parts of the world are facing life and death struggles on a daily basis. When you live such a sheltered and insulated existence that even mean words on the internet offend you, you will find the idea of an actual war absolutely incomprehensible. You will start believing that if we all just wish hard enough and retweet enough tweets, world peace will be achieved. I am not saying that these are bad goals. I am of course anti-war and I believe that world peace would be an amazing thing. But we have to understand that sometimes events are out of our control. And sometimes we have no choice but to fight back even if we hate the idea of fighting. That is just the harsh truth about life, especially when we look beyond the so-called first world. The school system and the media apparatus here in the West don't always paint an accurate picture of the world. They act as if war, conflict, and struggle are relics of the past, and they imply that society is sure to one day progress beyond such petty things as war. Again, this sounds nice, but there is no guarantee that this will happen. Progress is not some inevitable historical force. There is no such thing as an end of history, and merely wishing for world peace will not make the world peaceful. Thors wanted to live in peace. He did his best to live in peace, he risked his life to live in peace, and in the end violence still found him. And then, after his death, this same violence turned his own son into a ruthless soldier, even though that is exactly what Thors wanted to avoid. We've all heard the expression, violence is never the answer, but Vinland Saga teaches us that life is not that simple. In recent years, we've all heard the media make sweeping generalizations about men, and we've seen men as a group in general being accused of not doing enough to stop toxic masculinity. Some major brands even believed that implying that some men might be good but most others need to be ashamed of themselves was actually a good way to sell shaving products to those same men. The truth is that toxic behavior is toxic behavior, and it can be exhibited by both men and women. There's nothing toxic about being a strong man, about being assertive, and about being prepared to protect your family from attack. You might be the most peaceful man in the world, you might be a vegan who refuses to hurt a fly, but if you're walking in the woods with your wife who is 8 months pregnant and a wolf attacks you, you better be willing to grab a rock and smash that wolf's skull to protect your family. You may not want to hurt the wolf, you may not have any ill will towards the animal, but if the wolf attacks you, you must fight back. There is nothing toxic about understanding that sometimes, despite your best efforts, you will be faced with violence and aggression. When that happens, the solution is not to curl up in a ball and cry, or to close your eyes and wish for a more peaceful world. The only solution is to be a warrior, and that means having the strength to deal with less than ideal circumstances. There is an old Latin saying, if you want peace, prepare for war, and I think that this is one of the biggest lessons of Vinland Saga so far. You should seek peace, you should be a good person, and you should not engage in toxic behavior whether you're a man or a woman. But you should also be aware that other people don't have the same values as you, and they may try to trick you, trap you, and attack you. You need to be aware of that, and you need to prepare for that. Otherwise, you'll end up like Thor's or Ned Stark, and in the end your loved ones will still suffer. You can't protect anyone if you're dead. So you must always be vigilant, clever, and strong enough to survive. Setting a story in a harsh setting like the world of the Vikings is a great way to illustrate this point, but the message is just as applicable in our own lives here in the modern world. In your own life, whether at work, at school, or at home, you will face challenges that are no fault of your own. You will deal with things that you never wanted to deal with and that you did your very best to avoid. Don't expect to live a life free of challenges no matter how hard you want to, and don't be surprised when those challenges one day cross your path. Instead of being surprised, be prepared. Instead of giving up in despair, fight and overcome. Be a good person, but be a clever and vigilant person too. Expect the best, but prepare for the worst. Whether you live in the 11th century or the 21st century, this is the only way to survive. Unless you live in a perfect world, and spoiler alert, no one lives in a perfect world, you will have to deal with imperfect circumstances, with imperfect people, and with an imperfect society. We have to accept it, embrace it, and push through it. And in that sense, we are all warriors, and every day is a battlefield. If you enjoyed this video, you can leave a like to let me know. And if you happen to be new to AnimeUproar, please consider subscribing and hitting that notification bell. I want to give a big thank you to all of our AnimeUproar patrons for supporting our work and making our videos possible. A special thank you to all of our Pro Hero tier patrons, including the one and only Gilgamesh, Nothing But a Fan, Jason Wilson, King Zeldris, and Angel Cruz. An epic thank you to all of our The One tier patrons, the ones who stand above all other clans, including Baby Ray, Ace, Ingrata, Alolanatom, Maddie Mac, Mako-Takun, and Keelan. And finally, at the pinnacle of interdimensional greatness, a tier reserved only for legends. A massive thank you to Reagan Harrison and Lord Nuxanor, disciples of Lord Twigo himself. If you enjoy our videos and you think they provide value for you, consider supporting us on Patreon, link in the description. Even a single dollar will give you access to our exclusive patron-only Discord, and your name will appear in our videos along with these amazing people. As always, thank you guys so much for watching, and until next time, see ya, Space Cowboys.